They shared a face, but only one of them shared a soul with the law. In every town, the wrong man was arrested, the wrong name was cursed, and the wrong life was ruined. While one twin built a reputation of quiet innocence, the other moved like a shadow, stealing, killing, burning lives to the ground, then slipping back into safety behind a mirror of flesh. Witnesses swore they saw him. Judges swore by the evidence. And every time, the law closed its books satisfied, never realizing it had been hunting the wrong man all along. This is the story of a semi-twin who committed countless evils in plain sight, and a justice system that never knew it was being fooled. The mountains don't forget. That's what Mama always told us, sitting on the porch of our cabin while the mist rolled down from Cutter's Ridge like the breath of something ancient and watchful. The mountains remember every secret, every sin, every drop of blood spilled on their slopes. They keep their own accounts, she said, and settle them in their own time. I should have listened better. My name is Dalton Mercer, and I need to tell you about my brother Damon, though calling him my brother feels like claiming kinship with a copperhead just because we were born in the same holler. We came into this world on a February night in 1967 during an ice storm that knocked out power across 3 counties. Mama labored for 16 hours by lamplight, while Daddy boiled water and paced holes in the floorboards. When I finally arrived, blue and barely breathing, the midwife had to slap life into my lungs. "Thought we lost this one," she told Mama, wrapping me in a quilt Granny had stitched. But then, just as they'd given up on another child, Mama's body seized again. 20 minutes later, Damon slipped into the world easy as a Sunday morning, pink and screaming, his eyes already open and watching everything with an intensity that made the midwife cross herself. Fraternal twins, the doctor said when he finally made it up the mountain road 2 days later. Irish twins, some call them. Not identical, but close as brothers can be. Close in age, maybe, close in blood, but never close in spirit. We grew up in a tar paper cabin on Cutter's Ridge, named for the lumber company, that had clear-cut these mountains back in the 20s, leaving stumps like grave markers across the hillsides. Daddy worked at the mine until black lung took him when we were 12. Mama cleaned houses in town and took in sewing, her fingers bleeding from pushing needles through denim and canvas until late in the night. Damon and I looked similar enough that strangers couldn't tell us apart, especially once we hit our teens and filled out the same way, tall and rangy, with Mama's dark hair and Daddy's pale blue eyes. But those who knew us could always see the difference. I carried myself hunched, apologetic, always trying to take up less space in the world. Damon walked like he owned every inch of ground his boots touched. The first time I knew something was truly wrong with my brother, we were 9 years old. We found a cat in the woods, a half-wild tabby that someone must have dumped on the mountain road. It was starving, ribs showing through mangy fur, and when I held out my hand, it came to me, desperate enough to trust. I fed it scraps from our dinner, named it Patches, and built it a shelter from an old crate behind the cabin. 3 days later, I found Patches in the woods. What Damon had done to that cat, I won't describe here. Suffice to say, the animal had suffered before it died, and the suffering had been deliberate. "It was just a cat," Damon said, when I confronted him, his voice flat and incurious. "Don't be such a baby about it," I told Mama. but she was so worn down by Daddy's coughing and the weight of keeping us fed that she just shook her head. "Boys are rough sometimes," she said. "He'll grow out of it." He didn't. The incidents continued, always with animals at first. Dogs that disappeared from neighboring farms, found days later in conditions that made grown men look away. Squirrels, possums, even a deer once, all bearing signs of prolonged torment. The mountains were full of predators and accidents, so people just chalked it up to nature's cruelty. Nobody suspected a skinny kid from up on Cutter's Ridge. But I knew. I always knew. After Daddy died, something shifted in Damon. He was 13, and whatever thin membrane had separated his dark impulses from action seemed to dissolve. He started spending long hours in the woods alone, coming back with scratches on his arms and a light in his eyes that made my stomach turn. That was when Sarah Beckwith went missing. Sarah was a year younger than us, a sweet girl with red braids who lived in a trailer at the base of our ridge. She walked past our cabin every morning on her way to the school bus stop. One October morning, she never made it to the bus. The whole county turned out to search. Men with dogs combed the woods for days, calling her name until their voices went hoarse. They dragged the creek, checked abandoned mine shafts, knocked on every door from here to the county line. Sheriff Dawes set up a command post at the volunteer fire department, coordinating search teams and following up on leads that went nowhere. I watched Damon during those searches, saw him volunteer to help with an earnestness that fooled everyone. He tramped through the woods with the other searchers, calling Sarah's name, his face arranged in an expression of concern that never reached his eyes. At night, I heard him in the room we shared, breathing steady and deep, sleeping the sleep of the innocent. But I'd seen the scratches on his arms, fresh ones, deep enough to scar. And I'd noticed how he'd started washing his own clothes, something he'd never done before, scrubbing them in the creek before Mama could see. They never found Sarah. Eventually the searches stopped, the news crews left, and the missing posters faded in the sun. Her mama moved away the following spring, unable to bear living in a place that had swallowed her daughter whole. The official theory was that Sarah had been taken by someone passing through, some drifter who'd snatched her and disappeared down the highway. I knew better, but I was 13 years old, scared of my own brother, and I didn't know what to do with what I suspected. How do you accuse your own blood? How do you tell people that the person who shares your face might be a monster? So I stayed quiet, and the silence became a stone in my gut that grew heavier with every passing year. High school brought new opportunities for Damon's particular appetites. He was charming when he wanted to be, with an easy smile that made people trust him. He dated a string of girls, always choosing ones who were vulnerable. The shy ones, the poor ones, girls with bad home situations who were hungry for attention. Most of them ended things within a few weeks, and when I saw them afterward, they had a haunted look, though they never wanted to talk about what had happened. One girl, Melissa Pruitt, showed up to school with bruises on her arms that looked like finger marks. When the guidance counselor asked about them, Melissa just stared at the floor and mumbled something about falling. "You need to stay away from him," I told her once, catching her alone by her locker. She looked at me with eyes that had aged a decade in a month. Like you did, she said quietly and walked away. That hurt because it was true. I'd spent my whole life staying away from Damon, trying to pretend we weren't connected, that his sins weren't somehow mine by virtue of shared blood and shared features. People in town would sometimes mistake me for him, smile and wave, and I'd feel sick, knowing that they were greeting a shadow I could never fully escape. After graduation, I took a job at Morrison's Hardware in town and saved every penny I could. My plan was simple: get out, get far away, start over somewhere nobody knew the Mercer name. But Mama got sick the winter I turned 20, and I couldn't leave her alone with Damon. He'd gotten work at the lumber mill, operating a forklift and loading trucks. His supervisor said he was a good worker, showed up on time, did what he was told, never complained. Nobody there had any idea what he was capable of. The second disappearance happened that spring. Emma Chen was a nursing student from the community college, doing her clinical rotation at the county hospital, where Mama was being treated for pneumonia. She was kind to Mama, always taking extra time to make sure she was comfortable, and she'd smile at me when I visited in the evenings. Damon met her when he stopped by the hospital one afternoon. I saw them talking in the hallway, watched him deploy that easy charm, saw Emma's polite smile. Something cold settled in my chest. Stay away from her, I told him that night. He looked at me with those pale blue eyes, so like mine, and yet so different. I don't know what you're talking about, brother. Yes, you do. I know what you are. For a moment, something showed in his face, something ancient and hungry, and utterly inhuman. Then he smiled. You don't know anything. You've never known anything. You're just my scared little twin, born first, but always weaker, always hiding. 2 weeks later, Emma didn't show up for her shift. Her car was found in the hospital parking lot, keys still in the ignition, her backpack on the passenger seat, with her wallet and phone inside. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no leads. This time, the search was different. Emma's family had money and connections. State police got involved. The FBI sent agents. They interviewed everyone who'd been at the hospital that day, including Damon and me. The agent who talked to me was a woman named Patricia Wells, mid-40s with sharp eyes and a way of asking questions that made you feel like she could see straight through to your bones. You were at the hospital visiting your mother the evening Miss Chen disappeared, she said. Yes, Mom. I visited Mama every evening. Did you see Emma that night? No, ma'am. She worked days. I came after my shift at the hardware store around 6. What about your brother? My mouth went dry. This was it. The moment I'd been avoiding my whole life. Tell her, a voice screamed inside my head. Tell her everything. He stopped by too, I said. Brought Mama some magazines. Agent Wells watched me carefully. Your brother knew Emma. They'd met. He'd been to the hospital a few times. Did they seem friendly? I opened my mouth, closed it. Saw Sarah Beckwith's face in my mind, her red braids bouncing as she walked past our cabin. Saw Patches the cat. Saw Melissa Pruitt's haunted eyes. I guess so, I heard myself say. Emma was friendly with everyone. The moment passed. Agent Wells asked a few more questions, gave me her card, told me to call if I thought of anything. I took the card and nodded and hated myself. They never found Emma either. The investigation went cold within months. Her family offered a reward that nobody ever claimed. Eventually, they too moved away, unable to bear the not knowing. Mama died that summer, her lungs finally giving out despite everything the doctors tried. At the funeral, people hugged me and shook Damon's hand and said what a tragedy it was, losing both our parents so young. Nobody knew that I stood next to a killer while they offered their condolences. After Mama was buried, I had no reason to stay. I'd sold the cabin and split the money with Damon, $14,000 each, every penny of our inheritance. It was enough to start over somewhere else. "Heading out?" Damon asked the night before I planned to leave. We were sitting on the porch of the cabin one last time, watching the sunset paint Cutter's Ridge in shades of purple and gold. "Yeah, where to?" "Don't know. West, maybe. Somewhere flat." He was quiet for a moment. "You could have said something, all those times. You could have told." My hands clenched on the porch rail. "I know. But you didn't. Want to know why?" I didn't answer. "Because you're a coward," he said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "And because some part of you knows that if you'd told, they'd look at you different too. We share a face, brother. My sins would stick to you like pine pitch." He was right, and I hated him for it. "I'm done," I said. "Done with this mountain, done with this town, done with you." "No, you're not." He stood up, stretched, started walking toward his truck. "You'll never be done with me. I'm in your blood, in your bones, in every reflection you see. You can run to California or Alaska or the moon, but you'll always know what I am. And you'll always know you let me be it." He drove away, tail lights disappearing down the mountain road, and I sat there until full dark, listening to the sounds of the mountain, owls calling, branches creaking, the distant rush of the creek. The mountains don't forget, Mama had said. Neither would I. I didn't go west. I stayed. I couldn't run, knowing what I knew, carrying the weight of Sarah and Emma and all the others I suspected, but couldn't prove. Someone had to watch him. Someone had to be ready for the day when he finally made a mistake, when the law that had never noticed would finally see what I'd seen my whole life. I got a job at a sawmill, 2 counties over, far enough that people didn't immediately connect me to Damon, close enough that I could keep track of him. I rented a room above a garage and lived quietly, checking in with old contacts back home, listening for news. Years passed. Damon stayed at the lumber mill, became a foreman eventually. He bought a house in town, dated occasionally, but never seriously. To everyone who knew him, he was just Damon. Mercer, hard-working, kept to himself, maybe a little odd but harmless enough. There were other incidents over the years, though nothing as dramatic as Sarah or Emma. A hitchhiker who vanished from a truck stop 20 miles away. A sex worker from the city who was last seen in our county. A runaway teenager whose trail went cold on the mountain roads. None of it led back to Damon. He was too careful, too patient, too good at being invisible. I documented everything I could in a journal I kept locked in my room. Dates, names, suspicions. It was a pathetic collection of maybes and could-bes. Nothing that would stand up in court. Nothing that would convince anyone. But I kept writing, kept watching, kept waiting. The mountains don't forget, and they settle accounts in their own time. The end, when it came, wasn't dramatic. There was no final confrontation, no confession, no justice served by human hands. It was November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, when Damon went hunting up on Cutter's Ridge. He'd been going up there more often lately, and I suspected he had something hidden in the woods, a place he kept his secrets, his trophies, whatever satisfied his dark urges. He never came back down. The search teams found his truck at the old logging road, gear still inside, rifle missing. They tracked him about a mile into the woods before the trail just stopped. No blood, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was as if the mountain had simply opened up and swallowed him whole. They searched for 2 weeks, bringing in dogs and helicopters and volunteers from across the region. Sheriff Dawes, older now, with Sarah Beckwith's unsolved disappearance still haunting him, personally led teams into the roughest terrain. I joined the searches, same as I had for Sarah all those years ago. But this time, I wasn't looking to find anything. On the 9th day, I was searching alone in a section of woods I remembered from childhood. The terrain was rough there, full of old mine shafts and limestone sinkholes hidden under decades of leaf litter. I found one of those sinkholes, maybe 15 feet across, trees growing at odd angles around its edges. I stood at the edge and looked down into darkness that seemed to have no bottom. Something glinted in the fallen leaves near the sinkhole's edge. I crouched down and found it. Damon's hunting knife, the one Daddy had given him before he died. It was stuck in the ground, point down, like it had been placed there deliberately. I should have called out, should have marked the location for the search teams. Instead, I pulled the knife free, wiped the dirt from the blade, and threw it as far as I could into the woods. Then I walked away. They called off the search after 2 weeks, declared Damon missing, presumed dead, probably fallen into one of the old mine shafts or sinkholes that riddled this part of the mountain. A tragedy, everyone said. Such a shame. I sold his house, donated most of his possessions, kept only a few photographs, used the money to fund a scholarship at the community college in Emma Chen's name. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he's really dead, or if he somehow got away, started over somewhere else, with a new name and a new face. But I don't think so. The mountains don't forget, Mama said, and they settle their accounts in their own time. I'm an old man now, still living in these mountains, still carrying the weight of what I knew and what I didn't do. The hardware store where I work has a wall of missing persons posters, faces that fade and peel, but never quite disappear. Sometimes I stop and look at them. Sarah's school photo with her red braids, Emma's college portrait, all the others whose absences echo through these hollows. The law never noticed what Damon was. The sheriff, the FBI, the state police, they all looked but never saw. Maybe they didn't want to see. Maybe evil that wears a familiar face is too difficult to recognize. Or maybe the mountains knew all along, and they were just waiting for the right moment to collect what was owed. I still live on the edge of Cutter's Ridge, in a small house with a porch that faces the woods. On quiet evenings, when the mist rolls down from the peaks and the last light fades from the sky, I sit outside and listen to the mountain sounds. Owls calling, branches creaking, the distant rush of water over stone. The mountains don't forget, and neither do I. Sometimes, in my dreams, I'm 9 years old again, find her patches in the woods, understanding for the first time that evil can share your blood and your face. And I make a different choice. I run home and tell Mama everything, make her listen, make her see. The dream changes then, branches into 1,000 different futures, where Sarah Beckwith grows up and Emma Chen becomes a nurse, and my brother gets the help he needed before his darkness consumed him and everyone around him. But I wake up in this reality, the one where I stayed silent, where fear and cowardice and the weight of shed blood kept me from speaking until speaking wouldn't matter anymore. The law never noticed, but I did. And I'll carry that knowledge to my own grave. Just another secret these mountains will keep long after I'm gone. They say blood is thicker than water, but these mountains have drunk both, and they make no distinction between the two. In the end, we all return to the soil, and the mountains remember us exactly as we were. Every sin, every silence, every moment we chose to look away. My brother is gone, taken by the same mountains that kept his secrets for so long, and I remain the other half of a broken pair, living with the knowledge that monsters can look just like anyone else, just like me.